So we'll start by calling the meeting to order. And I'll put it out there to see if anyone wants to declare any measures of pecuniary interest for anything that's on the agenda. First of all, not first of all, did everybody receive the agenda? Yeah, okay. Larry, do you have something to say?
Yes, I declare a pecuniary interest on item 4. My wife's theater company is mentioned in the delegation's presentation.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So we'll go on to introduce the new members, but we'll maybe go through and kind of do everybody for the new members' benefit as well. So for new members, we currently have Councillor Larry McCabe, who we just heard from. Check him out on your Zoom window there. And Andy Bacanic, is that pronounced correctly? Bacanic?
Mechanic, yes, thank you.
Mechanic, like mechanic, but with a B.
You got it.
So Andy is a volunteer from the community at large, like the rest of us, except for Larry. Welcome.
Thank you.
I've asked the administration of the Heritage Committee to provide you with both with the documentation that we use as kind of the basis of our existence. It's a big green binder. I don't know if they've got it to you yet, but sometime soon. By the way, I'm working on a laptop with another monitor right beside it, which is bigger. So you may find that I'm often looking here rather than looking there. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. It just means that I'm looking at the other monitor. Other members of our Heritage Committee. So first of all, for the new members, we're an advisory committee to council. So we're technically a City of Stratford Heritage Committee. Our job is to advise council on matters of heritage, as well as do a few other heritage related things. We deal with not only designations, but we have what we call the Blue Plaque program, which is almost kind of like a promotional thing related to heritage and the City of Stratford, where instead of designating buildings that have heritage significance, we award a blue plaque that can be mounted on buildings that have housed some person of heritage importance in the past. So it's a little more like past citizens, past residents of Stratford, as opposed to specific building. Although it's applied to the building, it's for places that they've lived usually. Anyway, other members on our committee are Jeff Atchison, who has an architectural background. We've got Barb Cottle, who's done a lot of heritage stuff with us in the past. Both of them have been here on one term. I think this is have you guys started your second term now, or is this still your first term for both of you? Second term? Yeah. And then we got Jacob, who's been our veteran member. He's been around forever. He's a mason in the city and therefore has a lot of firsthand contact with a lot of our heritage buildings. So we tap him for technical knowledge related to masonry, of course. My background is I'm a civil / structural engineer, born and raised in most of my professional experience in Stratford. So I've been around the block a few times. Then we've got Casey, who's our committee's right hand. She does all the important work of organizing everybody. Miranda Ivy, who's listed in there. There she is. She's popped up on my video. She's the city planner. So we tap her for advice on various planning events, not events, planning items. Lorena is a presenter that's going to be presenting later, and Jonathan Deward's the chief building official. He usually doesn't come, but he's got a presentation to do tonight, so that's why he's involved tonight. These meetings are open to the public and are recorded and posted on the website, so try not to swear too much. And we'll move on to things. So we're on to item number 4. Sorry, while we're still on 3, later on we'll talk a little bit with our new members about putting you on some of our subcommittees that you might be interested in, related to running the Blue Plaque program or the designation committee or the approval committee. Every building permit application that comes into the city that is related to either a designated building or a building that's in our designated heritage district, which is basically the downtown core, gets cycled through by email to members of a subcommittee of our Heritage Committee that deals with reviewing those and commenting back to the building department on whether the proposed renovations are approved or disapproved or partially approved based on various heritage considerations. Okay, now on to item number 4 in our agenda. We have a delegation, well, 2 delegations, item 4 and item 5, related to some signage being proposed for 35 Waterloo Street. We'll listen to both designations, I think, before we field any questions, just because it'll be a little more inclusive. We'll hear both sides first and then start quizzing people on things. So Loretta, welcome to our Heritage Committee.
Thank you.
You can, let me just before you start, did everybody get the paperwork that came with the agenda about the signage at 35 Ontario Street? There should be a management report, a signed permit application addenda, and also I think there was something else, but it might have just been, no, there is one more thing here. No, that's Steve and Avon Crest. It might just be those 2 things.
Drawings, Brian.
Pardon?
Some drawings, I believe.
Yeah, I printed out everything. Oh, here they are. Sorry. There's a 1 page that's just the outline to signage report. Then there's the management report that includes some photos and some comments from the city management, which I guess are technically part of the next delegation. And this one, which I think is part of this delegation that I've just printed on 4 to a page, which is the signed permit application addenda. Everyone got all those? Perfect. Okay. Sorry, Lorena, I was just making sure that everybody had everything to start with.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I'll begin by thanking you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I'm actually sitting from the office at the Foster Family Centre. I'll try not to take up any more time than needed. I will say that this is the second run at trying to secure this change copy sign. Last year, we appeared before various committees, but for some reason or another, we were not able to appear before this one. So I greatly appreciate having that opportunity today. I guess I should start off. I moved to Stratford in 1980, and in the early 80s, I was a huge promoter of the heritage of the cities, initiated an organization called the Stratford Heritage Trust, which was around for a few years, and championed the Craven Knit building, which we lost, and championed the Hamlet School, which we won, which was then converted into Cedarcroft. Only to say is that you're speaking or you're hearing a huge advocate of heritage buildings in this community and elsewhere. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Coles notes at the Falstaff Family Centre, we call it a family centre, but it's zoned as a community centre. Since purchasing the school in 2000 and initiating its heritage designation, I've essentially put it back into the service of the community. Given that it has never made a profit, but rather has required underwriting by myself for more than 20 years, the majority of what we do here is an act of public service. The Falstaff Family Centre also supports many groups, which include children and families, Indigenous, multicultural, civic and climate emergency and mental health themes which are in short terms of are short in terms of public awareness and are at the forefront of some of our most serious contemporary challenges. So these groups are often looking to mount temporary signage for their various events and initiatives, some which come and go in the calendar year, such as Truth and Reconciliation Day, Earth Day, and hence, because of this need for multiple signs up for different durations, we decided that the most appropriate application was for a change copy sign. And this is partly out of convenience for ourselves, but also we feel that it can be managed in a complementary way to the heritage building. The vision that we've been operating under has been one of a living fence. And when I say a living fence, that we envision that the chain link fence that you all have seen over how many years is not particularly beautiful. It does its job. And so what we envision is actually building some shrubs in the inside, some vines over it, and placed in very particular places are these signs. And that when we're discussing with staff that in order to qualify for a change copy sign, we'd have to create we were thinking a wooden lattice, a lattice affixment that we can put to the fence, that we then put those signs or banners to that can be changed quite easily. Now, in our initial application, and the one that we're still running with at this time, is for 5 locations, bearing in mind that I can hardly think of any times of the year where there would ever be, I want to be careful, don't want to say never, but there would rarely be 5 signs of any kind on that around the fence at the same time. But the strategy or the thinking that we had was that the primary location for public awareness is actually at the southwest corner of William and Waterloo, where people driving over the bridge, coming towards the property, if there's a message to be imparted, that is really the kind of prime real estate. But we also felt that there may be other occasions for a banner, a sign, I'll just use them interchangeably, on Waterloo, and then another one further down towards Elizabeth Street, where we also have thought that there may be occasions, for example, if there is something going on for a length of time. Last year was the Here for Now company that Larry mentioned. It could be Kiwanis, could be anything that comes in and wants to park here for a certain length of time. Rather than having a larger banner really drawing the attention, we would have smaller signage at each corner just to denote to people that this was the Falsey Family Centre and that activity was happening on this location. And we would take a larger banner down after it had been announced. So, for example, if we're back at last year with the Here for Now, we were imagining a tenant such as that putting a large banner just at the beginning of their season, taking that one down, and then just putting these 2 smaller ones at the wings, so people who may be coming from out of town would recognize that about the property. And so that we'd envision a kind of rotation of these signs or banners. I think, for example, Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is the 30th of September, is in close proximity of often a climate rally also in September. So there could be 2 different banners or signs on the I'll say on the fence, but on the lattice work at the same time. And then they would come down after. We felt after a couple of weeks that are promoting, or maybe just the week leading up to the event, and then be taken down right after that. And there could be months that go by where there would be no signage whatsoever on the fence. Or for example, we had the Upper Thames Children's Water Festival here last year, and it's kind of event we like to promote in advance as well. It was wonderfully, it was very well attended nonetheless. And you may also be aware that one of the gestures of their presence was actually the artwork of water and fish that is woven onto the fence that we see in some of the other schools in the county, which in a council meeting last year, Mr. De Vert indicated to a councillor that indeed this was art. It was not to be regarded as signage. But most importantly, we want to work with this advisory committee to address any concerns about, visibility of the building and so on. It's the chronology of the steps that we took. We hand delivered 80 letters to the neighborhood. We held a meeting here to get the neighbors' feedback about what they would tolerate or what they would find suitable. And we gave them the vision that I just imparted to you, and they were pretty much on board. We were also of a consensus that even though a digital sign would comply with the current bylaw, it would not be something that would be complementary to this heritage building. which is why these manual hand banners on the fence. We check with staff and we work with staff to ensure that there were no visibility. They raised a couple things. We looked at it. We said, yep, you're right. We changed that. And so staff felt that from their perspective, they didn't have a concern for those 5 proposed sign placements, so long as we were prepared to embark upon an encroachment agreement. So, essentially that's the Coles notes of this. I don't want to belabor this any further. As someone who's taken a keen interest in heritage for a very, very long time and stepped up to the plate even in purchasing this property, I don't think my credentials are under question. I think the challenge is, if I were this committee, is the balancing of interests, a bit like a judge does, and really the quest I'm to put out to the committee is there. Do you feel this would be complementary enough to the heritage building? So I'd be open to any questions. I know any of the groups that I'm really representing here, reminding that this is not a commercial profit center, believe me, but really it's an enterprise to support many groups and many initiatives who don't have the wherewithal to get a presence in the community. And I will also add that in the few occasions where we've had something up on the fence, even like the Ukrainian flag that is there now, we've had a number of people have said, we're happy to see that. And I think that this is an opportunity to show solidarity and raise awareness, but at the same time where we're not setting a bad example and that for a bad precedent. So thank you. I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll maybe just hold the questions until we hear the delegation from the city, which from the management report that I've read that we received, it sounds like they're going to ask for a reduction in signs. We might as well hear both sides before we start covering things. So for now, we're going to move on. We'll come back to you, Lorena, if you don't mind sticking around. But for now, we'll move on to Jonathan DeWeerd, who I think is going to present the management report.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. I will also keep my comments brief tonight. So yes, you have received a copy of our management report. Just so we're clear, we're not making any recommendations at this point. We're just looking for input from the committee one way or the other. As we're all aware, this building has been designated for heritage, and as such, the signs are subjected to review by this committee. So the objective is for us to consider the signs an exemption to the city's sign bylaw, and through extension with this committee specific to the heritage components. So the variance, as Ms. McKenna noted, is for 5 additional permanent signs. As far as the sign bylaw is concerned, these would be classified as ground signs with removable banners attached, as per we've heard already tonight. The variance is to allow these in a residential and R2 1-15 zone. Currently there is only 1 ground sign permitted in this zone. Previously in 2012, variance was applied for and received to expand an existing sign. And the minutes from 2012 indicate at the time the committee did have concerns about additional signs, and the final outcome was the sign didn't change, but they allowed a few extra names to be added along the bottom. Section 25 of our sign bylaw indicates that neither maintenance or repair of signs for advertising would have played the change of the message. And no permits would be needed in the future when the applicant would decide if they would like to change those messages. So therefore, the change copy or the change of banners would be permitted in the future if these were approved by council. as Ms. McKenna noted, we have gone through this process somewhat, and there was no decision by council, and it was deferred back to staff to work with the applicant, which we've done, and that's why we're back starting the process again now this year. The previous recommendation, which is highlighted in bold on page 4 of the report, does outline the recommendation that this committee had made previously on this, and as Ms. McKenna noted, there isn't really any substantial changes from the original application. And that recommendation or that motion that was made by this committee was that the Heritage Stratford Advisory Committee supports the granting of an exemption from the sign bylaw 159-2004 at 35 Waterloo Street North, subject to the total number of signs approved being reduced from 5 to 3, with 1 large horizontal sign in the middle and 2 smaller sized ones on each end. So that was actually the recommendation of this committee previously, prior to the election in the fall. The staff currently are not supportive of the exemptions, as the sign does not adhere to the sign bylaw, and these signs would be located on the city property and require encroachment agreements. Acceptance of these exceptions could influence future applications and are not in compliance with the sign bylaw. Therefore, the staff are not currently in support of these signs, but we are working with the applicant to bring the application through. So again, at this time, open and able to answer any questions that the advisory committee has.
Unmute. Okay. I have a few questions, but does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask first? All right, I'm gonna shoot first then. On the site plan submitted from the Falstaff Family Center, we're talking about 5, I guess to cover a little bit of summary first. So there's an existing approval for 3 signs, and the Falstaff Center would like to increase it to 5. Is that correct? Jonathan?
Actually, sorry, Brian, at this time, there is no approval. The approval is for the current ground sign that is on the site. So there is a wooden ground sign. I believe it is on the corner of Water and Waterloo Streets. On that corner, on the angle, it is in the photos, in the documents that have been provided, a wood relief type ground sign. That is the existing. We're talking about 5 additional signs.
Okay.
So I believe it's
so
listed on that plan as existing.
So the quote from the Heritage Committee related to the 2004 sign bylaw wasn't acted on it whatever meeting that was.
So correct. So that recommendation was made by the Heritage Committee at this past fall. The recommendations made their way back to council. Council did not make a decision at that time, but rather elected to defer or refer it back to staff to work with the applicant. We've had conversations with Ms. McKenna, and the Falstaff Center would like to go back to their original request of 5 signs. So we're back starting the process again. We will be going to subcommittee, committee, and council. And this time we got out of a little sync last time, but this time we are going in the proper process and starting with the Heritage Committee.
Okay. Another question, Lorena, did you hear or read the comment about any sign measuring over 1.6 meters in height above grade needs to be signed and sealed by a professional engineer? Are you interested in of the sign? You've got the one sign type B, of which I think you have 2 proposed locations, would qualify as that, needing a professional engineer. Are you interested in reducing those 2 locations down to from the type B to your type C, which is less than 1.6 meters, which would not require a professional engineer signature? Does that make sense?
This is not my forte. My colleague Errol Fisher, who normally assists me with interpreting some of this, is not with me presently. But listen, I'm agreeable to, if this is something that is a preferred route to go, I'm sure it would be fine.
I think it would save you money, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good recommendation, Brian.
I have another question. On the sheets from the sign permit application addenda from the Falstaff Family Center, the site plan, which is on page 5, if I count up, I see 6 locations here as well as the existing ground sign. But the discussion and the wording has been talking about 5 locations. Which of these 6 locations is not being discussed at this point? Do you guys follow? Did I describe that appropriately?
I mean, from my side, at no time have we talked about six additional locations. It's really just been 5.
That's what's
What-
being shown on the site plan, 6 locations, plus your existing ground sign.
Yeah, it shows from Elizabeth Street wrapping around Waterloo to William Street. It shows sign type A, sign type B, sign type A, sign type A. Sorry, that first one was a B. I circled it and then wrote over the letter, so I couldn't even read it. And then another sign type A. So it's 2 sign type Bs, which are the tall ones at the beveled corner fronting Elizabeth Street. 2 long and narrow ones on fronting onto Waterloo Street. It shows another long narrow one on the bevel fronting onto William Street, as well as the sign type C, which is a little bit bigger than poster size fronting onto William Street. Looks like 1.22 wide by 1.52 meters tall fronting onto William Street. That sign type A fronting on the bevel on William Street, I'm wondering if that's shown on there incorrectly, because on all the various little diagrams, it doesn't show anything that big on that stretch of fence.
I believe on page 7, that's location A that they're showing on page 7, Brian. So from pages 7 to 11, those are the 6 signs shown in elevation. There are 6 signs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lorena, do you remember how many signs you have fronting on, not including the existing sign on the
Yes.
bevel? How many signs are you proposing on the beveled fence fronting onto William Street? 1 or 2?
Well, one large one.
Yeah.
And in the event where there is something, excuse me. Okay, my colleague Errol is on the phone. And perhaps he can explain this.
All right.
I'm
Is he
sorry.
available now, or we can come back to him in a couple minutes if he's busy at the moment?
Can he join in?
Yes.
I hate to draw this out, but if
No,
it's
that's fine. He can join in, right, Casey? We just have to figure out how to get him the link.
I'll send it to him.
we'll send the link to him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a public meeting. He can just join in.
Lorena, I can see him on as an attendee, so I can promote him to panelist, Brian.
Oh,
Thank
okay,
you.
good. Yeah. Go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
he should
appreciate your
pop up here
patience.
now.
Yeah, no problem. While we're waiting
There
for
he
him to join, Jonathan, I do have another question for you.
Okay,
Jonathan, are
I'm
you
here.
hearing me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
fine.
In this management report, it talks about an encroachment agreement between the Falstaff Center and the city because much of that chain link fence is on city property. But when you were talking about it, it sounded as though the city was not going to be requiring an encroachment agreement. Is that accurate?
The city will be requiring the encroachment agreement for the fence and would also require it for the signs, should these signs be approved.
Okay, so the city is going to require an encroachment agreement in order to leave the fence where it is and or attach signs to the fence. Whatever's there, it needs an encroachment agreement unless they move it back onto the property, which nobody's proposing. I'm just clarifying that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, Errol, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, no problem. I have a few questions. I'll recap one that I already asked. The description that we got was that the Falstaff Center was looking for a proposal to add 5 more signs in addition to the existing sign that's mounted to the ground near the corner of Waterloo and William Street. But on page 4 of the package of sheets that we got with the Falstaff Family Center logo on the front page, on the 5th page, there's a site plan, and on that site plan sheet, it actually shows 6 proposed signs.
That is
5?
correct.
Is it 5 or 6 that you guys are asking for?
So thank you, Vice Chair. It is 5 signs that we are asking for, and I was the one who drew the site plan. Originally, when we made the application and we're working with staff, we had identified 2 taller type C signs, I believe they are, that were located on the angled portion at the northwest corner of the property at the intersection of Waterloo and Waterloo and Elizabeth.
Okay.
However, in consultation with staff, they indicated that they had a concern with those being in the site triangle for the intersection. And so we adjusted the application to include the sign further to the west on Elizabeth, and the 2 banners along Waterloo. The 1 banner along Waterloo, the one on the corner of Waterloo and Elizabeth, and then the smaller one located to the west, to the east of the existing ground sign. Does that clarify?
Partially. It clarifies that things are different than what the site plan shows, but I didn't quite follow all of that. So let's recap. So there's been a few changes to the site plan drawing that shows the 6 proposed sign locations. You mentioned type C, but it's actually the type B. I'm not criticizing. I'm just so we're all talking about the same thing. The type B was shown as 2.13 meters tall. The type C was shown as 1.52 meters tall on these pages. So am I correct in summarizing that the 2 type Bs that were on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Waterloo Street are no longer 2 type Bs and they are a type A, did you say?
Yes, that's correct. It was the type A is the smallest of the signs.
The type A is the very long one, the very wide one, but very short.
Do forgive me, I'm working from memory here.
Yeah, no problem.
But yes, so the long type, the long ones are, there's 3 of those. There's one on the corner of Waterloo and Elizabeth.
Okay.
One in the middle where the gate is in the fence, and one to the north end of the property. And then there are 2 of the type C, which I believe are the smallest of the group.
Yes.
And there's one at the south end of the property on Elizabeth, and one at the north end of the property on, one at the south end of the property on William, and one at the north end of the property on Elizabeth. And the type B, which are the tallest of the signs, were originally to be located on the angle section, but they were deemed to be in the site triangle. And so we removed those from the application.
So those are no longer being discussed, correct? Correct?
That's correct.
All right. So just to describe it in possibly
Can we bring it up on the screen, Brian? Would that be?
I don't know how to do that, but
Let me
do it the cheap and dirty way. Here's my understanding of it. Can you guys see that? It's basically CAAAC.
That's correct.
Does everyone follow that? I know it's tiny, but it's basically creating a smiley face. And I know this is a little bit hokey sounding, but it's creating a smiling face with a C dimple on both sides and 3 A's going across.
So the 2
Correct.
Bs are replaced by the C, basically.
Yeah, B's are no longer involved in the discussion.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. Just making sure we're all on the same page. So the discussion about the taller signs which are no longer being discussed requiring an engineer is already no longer a point.
With your, at your pleasure, I could speak to that, that we have engaged the services of an engineer to review all of the structures because Lorena felt it would be best for us to just ensure that everything was safe and properly constructed. So we have reached out to an engineer and they are standing by pending the outcome of this situation.
That as far, Jonathan, can you please confirm that that is great but optional?
Engaging engineers is always great, Brian.
My wife might disagree. All right, so is everybody on the committee kind of in tune with what's going on here and the changes we've made on the fly a little bit? All right, and I think that's the end of my questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yeah, Andy?
So I just wanted to first commend the applicant's goal to support civic issues and the initiatives around children, families, and communities, as outlined in the approach paper. I actually visited the site just to get some context. I think from my understanding, the two major issues are precedent here, as well as how the signage will interact with the heritage element of the building. I think from what I saw, as Lorena pointed out, the fencing is unsightly. I think the fact that they have chosen to do these wood screens is going to add, is going to improve the situation there. So I commend you on that. As well, the road level, the elevation at the road and the elevation of the building, there is an elevation difference there. So I would say that I don't see the signs taken away from the heritage building or the forecourt as was outlined in the minutes that I read. As has been, explained, there are no sightline issues either for pedestrians or for traffic. There has been no, the neighboring properties were canvassed. There was no opposition letters. There's 3 homes south facing the property on Waterloo Street. And again, you didn't get any opposition letters to those. I think the other item that I read about was discretion over messaging. That obviously can't be controlled. And I don't think messaging on anybody's property in terms of signage can be controlled. I don't see that as a factor to deny the applicant's variance. So I guess in my mind, it comes down to precedent. So it's essentially the number and size of signs, I think is probably the major issue here. So those are kind of my comments rather than questions.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I do have one more question, just as a recap, to make sure I understood things correctly. Jonathan, my understanding is that if the heritage, whatever the heritage committee approves, that it's not the final and binding decision, it's just a recommendation to council, that council then has the final decision on this, correct?
So yeah, just that's a good clarification. Thank you, Brian. So yes, we would be, council would be looking for some sort of a recommendation from this advisory committee on the heritage components. The other components will be dealt with by well, it'd be the planning and heritage subcommittee that deals with the sign itself, the variance, but we'd be looking for the advice or a motion from this committee on the heritage components of the signs.
And the motion would essentially be from a heritage perspective to allow the exemption of the property for these 3 to 5 or 1 or whatever number we pick sign locations from the sign bylaw. Is that correct wording?
That would very much similar to what was provided before would be an acceptable motion. Yes.
Right. All right, any other questions while we're on this? No. I think the next point of business then is to see if anyone would like to make a motion.
Had her hand up.
Barb, you're muted. Don't forget. There you go. No, now you're off again.
Sorry.
There you go.
I guess my question is, about the idea of compromise, because the committee felt that that was a lot of signs last time and very large signs. And that's why we kind of went with offering approval for 3. Can you tell us why there's no room for compromise with this, or why it has to be 5?
Oh, I don't, are you asking me?
Well, yeah, because I'm assuming it went back to you and you've come back with asking for 5 again, right?
Yes, I mean, I think there is room for compromise. I wouldn't say, I think if we ended up with 3, that would be fine as well. You know, I'm just looking at those situations where there may be a need more at the same time. And again, bearing in mind that people must not envision that there's going to be 5 signs up there all the time. It's having the flexibility to put them up, but we can make 3 work. So, and I don't, yeah, we can make 3 work. It's just 5 we felt would be even better, so.
And I just asked a question, making 3 work, but in different locations at different times of the year, is that important to you?
Well, I mean, I think from our perspective, the most important sign location is that one facing the bridge, because it seems it's our view that anyone coming over the bridge, it's hard to miss whatever that's saying. There are, you know, as I say, there could be Truth and Reconciliation on the 30th of September, but there could also be the climate thing happening. So it might have something, a banner in the middle of the fence. But that might be all that would be there for a week or so, or a couple of weeks in September. So whereas in the winter time, there doesn't seem to be a lot of, it's hard to predict, because, you know, there in the past we've held films here to do with the unintended consequences of children technology. So we'd be wanting to promote that event. So we can't predict exactly what's going to come up, but you know, we'll make work whatever the committee feels is suitable. You know, this is not to push things. I like to think I can be a team player.
Anyone else? All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
I can leave the room.
I'll make a motion. Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the Heritage Committee accepts a total of 4 sign locations, but rather than have it on the front of the fence facing onto Waterloo Street, to keep them as 2 on each of the 2 bezels at the corner, as in the corner facing Elizabeth and Waterloo Street, which would suit for the traffic heading towards downtown, and also the beveled corner of the fence at the corner of Waterloo and William Street to suit the traffic heading away from the bridge. Each of those 2 bevels would be limited to 1 type A and 1 type C sign. A seconder?
Brian, you can't make a motion as the chair, but you
sorry.
can say the wording if someone else would like to put that motion ahead.
If somebody would like to take that wording and make it prettier.
I'll make the motion exactly as you stated.
Jacob seconding. All in favor? For 5. And Larry's abstaining because of his pecuniary interest. Passed. So Casey, can you write that up and forward it through to the appropriate channels at council for them to consider that recommendation for whatever they're doing with it?
Absolutely. And I'll actually send a proof through before I do that to make sure I've done it exactly as stated.
Okay. As a basis, I guess use the comment from last fall as kind of the guideline, but we've changed it. And that one talked about reducing from 5 to 3, and we're actually talking about reducing it from I don't know what we're reducing it from, just say allowing up to 4. And also specified to be kept on those 2 beveled corners. Okay, part of that argument then is that if people want to enjoy the heritage features of the old school, the building, they can stand across the street and get their clear view through the chain link fence like it's been for the last 60 years. All right. Next
Harold?
item.
We have a hand up there, Brian.
Oh, sorry. Who has the hand up?
Errol was wanting to speak.
Errol. Go ahead, Errol.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to highlight for you on the bevel at Elizabeth and Waterloo, there is a very large tree located in the middle of that bevel, and which could make the placement of a type A sign challenging. So I didn't know if you were aware of that, and so I just wanted to bring that to you.
I haven't been as diligent as Andy. I haven't been by there in the last few weeks. So no, I wasn't aware of that.
We can change it to 2 type Cs on that bevel at Elizabeth
Yeah.
and Waterloo then.
So
How
therefore
about
you can have a pair bordering the tree. Would that be appropriate?
If it's visible, it would be fine by me. Again, without going out there and looking at, I know, I recall that was why we discarded that beveled in the first place. But again, I don't want to protract this application any further. But Errol, what would do you think that 2 Cs would work, or we can?
The type Cs are 1.22 meters wide by 1.52 meters tall. Or for those of you who are bilingual, that's 4 feet wide by 5 feet tall.
So if I may,
Yeah.
in discussing it with staff, because of the site triangle issue on that corner, they had identified that putting the smaller, the 4x5 sign, if you will, facing Elizabeth. So on the lower section, not on the bevel, so just adjacent on the panel adjacent to the bevel, and locating the longer sign, the 4 foot by 20 foot sign on the Waterloo face, but at the bevel, as close to the bevel as possible, so as to not be in the site triangle, but to also not block the center of the view of the building from across the street.
Andy, I guess technically this is your motion. Are you okay with that? Revising your motion to have the 2 signs just beside the bevel, one along Elizabeth Street and one along Waterloo Street?
Absolutely. I think that will still create a clear view of the building from Waterloo Street.
All right. Point of order. Do we need to revote for that modified motion? I think we do, right? Yeah. Better revote for that modified motion then. All in favor? Same people as before. All right. Thank you, Lorena and Errol, for attending, and Jonathan. We're moving on. Where's my agenda? Hang on a sec. For the committee members, hang on a second while I find my agenda that I've buried in my paperwork here somewhere. There, I found it. Okay, item 6. Election of 2023 chair and vice chair. Now, my understanding.
Over for you, Brian.
What was that?
I can take this part over for you.
Okay, I just wanted to cover first that, Casey, if you can confirm that council's actually looking for another 1 or 2 volunteers to assign to the committee as in addition to Larry and Andy, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You guys actually have 2 vacancies right now on this committee, and they have re-advertised and received applicants. So that'll be going to council, probably the next one, which will be the 27th, to try to fill those 2 citizen positions.
Okay. That's February 27th?
Yes, that's not for sure, but I would assume that probably it will be at that meeting.
Okay. All right, you run this section then, okay?
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with nominations for the chair for this year. Would anyone like to nominate someone for chair for 2023?
I nominate Jacob.
Are there any other nominations?
Brian?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that. Who nominated Brian? Oh, Andy did. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that, Andy. Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, we're going to do a motion now to just close the nominations. So a mover and a seconder,
I'll move it if I'm allowed.
Andy and Barb. I'll use Andy and Barb.
Okay.
Andy and Barb. Okay. Jake, will you allow your name to stand for chair?
Sure.
Brian, are you willing to allow your name to stand as chair?
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Okay, so now what we do is we're looking for one of the members to actually put a motion on the table to nominate nominate one of the two nominees as the chair, and we'll vote on it.
So I put a motion in to nominate Brian as chair of the group, chair of the committee.
Okay, so motion by Andy to nominate Brian as chair of the committee. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Jeff? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, that is carried. So Brian,
All right.
you are the chair.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna move on to vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Jake.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, a motion to close the nominations. Okay, Jake, will you allow your name to stand as vice chair?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to elect Jacob as the 2023 vice chair. All in favor? All right, that's carried. All right, back to you, Brian.
Congratulations, Jacob.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, item 7, adoption of the previous minutes. Well, we're skipping that because it's been about 100 years since we had a meeting. And we're jumping on to 8. Business arising from previous minutes. Destination Stratford audio tours update from Barb and Brian. I don't think we have much, but Barb, I'm gonna let you run it.
Basically, I did a lot of research and wrote a lot of stuff, and I wrote too much because I became too involved in how interesting it all was. And I think Brian and Cambria were going to try to edit that down, and I don't think anyone had time for it. So I don't know where we stand with it, whether you want me to go back in and try to cut it down some more. Now that I've been away from it a while, maybe I will have more,
Well, we're
more objective eyes. I don't know.
right
Or-
now.
yeah.
I'm not gonna tell, I'm never gonna tell you not to do that, but right now we're a little bit short-handed. So if
Okay.
we get 2 or 3 more people on here, we might find somebody that is just what they've been dying to do.
They want to edit all my blather. Yes.
So,
The other
I'm gonna
thing-
suggest we maybe put it off for a month or 2.
And we didn't really know what format we were going to put it in anyway. So it's not like, it's still a long-term project, I think, once we get past this part. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Next item, 8.2, community partners and projects. Which there's a few things that I'll talk about later in the new business section. But I don't think there's anything else that we have going on right now under this item. Yeah, we'll talk about Jamie Anderson Award and Blue Plaque later in new business. So I don't think we have anything under 8.2. 8.3, update on former Perth County Registry Office. Miranda, can you give us an update on that?
I have no updates on this item this
Uh,
evening.
Just to recap, our last update was basically that the county had been told by the city that city wasn't going to support them messing around with it too much. And the county was looking to find some kind of use for it without demolishing it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Next item, 8.4, update on 265 St. David Street permit. Again, Miranda.
City staff have been in contact with the city solicitor, and we are still reviewing some paths forward for that permit. But upon review of the council resolution relating to this matter, it appears that they had met that resolution. They just did not follow the proper process, and it is anticipated that a report will be brought to council in the coming months.
Okay, thank you. It just occurred to me, I kind of breezed through 8.3 there for our new members who might not know what we're talking about. The former Perth County Registry Office under 8.3, which is the building across from the street from the library. It's on the north side of the street that the library is on, right behind the county courthouse at the end of Ontario Street, was being proposed by, well, the word got out that the county was planning to demolish it. And so there was a flurry of activity last fall, I think it was, when it first came up. And the city, it's not a designated building on its own, but it's within our heritage district, which is basically the downtown core. So any building permit related to that building, because it's part of the Heritage Committee, would have to get approved through the city, including cycled through our approvals subcommittee of our Heritage Committee. The city, I'm told that the mayor spoke to the warden of Perth County and basically said, don't even try it because it's not going to happen. So everything's kind of on hold there. Nobody really knows what they're doing other than they're not going to be demolishing it. Okay, item 9, designation subcommittee update. Update on non-designated properties register, which also is Miranda.
So staff are in the process of reviewing the changes made to the Ontario Heritage Act by Bill 23 to determine some path forwards. The regulations only recently came out. It is anticipated that the properties that were recommended in the second and third phase of the project will require additional review to determine if they meet the increased threshold to add them to the register or to list them on the register. And it's further anticipated that additional communication and mailouts will be required for the affected property owners.
Okay. I also got an inquiry recently from somebody on the Heritage Committee of, I think it was Saugeen Shores down, I was going to say Sarnia way, but it's not Sarnia, it's more Windsor way, about how we're dealing with Bill 23, and I haven't responded to them at all, but this is all kind of part of that. And Miranda, just to confirm, Bill 23 hasn't actually passed yet, right? It's just a proposal at this stage?
Bill 23 is in force and effect.
Oh, it is in effect?
And the remaining, there's still regulations to come,
Yeah.
but no, Bill 23 is in force and effect.
Yeah, okay. Miranda, would it be okay if I forwarded you that contact email? Who, I forget who, it came through somebody at the city, but they were basically just asking for the chair of the Heritage Committee, and that's when the question came through after they had my contact info. They weren't really saying what they were doing, if I remember correctly, related to Bill 23, but they were asking, what are we doing related to Bill 23? I don't have any real.
The email did come to me.
Well? Yeah, okay.
And I responded, and we will be in discussion as we find our path forward.
Yeah, okay. I don't think we had any I don't think we had any connection with them. I think they were just canvassing anyone that they could contact to try and get an idea of how to deal with it. Barb, you put your hand up?
I just wondered, is this is the other places that are on the list, they're grandfathered? We don't have to go through this with everything?
Pardon?
The changes you're talking about, that now we have to go through more paperwork for these houses, these designated houses, right? That won't affect the ones that were already on the list. We don't have to do all that work again for those.
So one of the changes made includes that properties listed on the register but that are not designated will be required to be designated by council within 2 years. So the intent of the list has changed. And that is a work in process.
Thank you.
We're definitely gonna want to include Laura in that conversation when we get a chance to see her, because she's got a background in dealing with the Heritage Act and all that. So she maybe has some good advice for us based on whatever she's doing in the London area, I think is where she's based. So so she might have some good tips. All right. Anything else about that item from anyone? All right, we'll move on. Where are we at here? 10, Development Services Report. Which we got in paper. Miranda, are you reading that, or is
So I have no additional details to provide beyond what is provided in that report.
all right. This is really just updating what Jake and I have been up to. Jake and I are currently the only two still on the approvals review committee. And so when there's building permits to go through that are from a designated building or in the designated heritage district, the building permit reviews get sent through at this point to Jake, and I will cover who's going to be on this subcommittee later on in today's meeting if people want to join in. And so this was 140 Norman Street, where they're doing some renovations. There's been a couple other things that Jake and I have been reviewing recently that aren't on this list, but I don't think any of them, the paperwork's really gone through yet. So one being the 5th revision to the proposed renovations to the old Cobflesh building. And then there was another thing where they wanted to do addition on, I think it was Coburg Street, where the building wasn't designated. It wasn't in the designated heritage district, but the houses on either side of it were designated. So it was going through a minor variance, if I remember correctly, because they were squeezing one of those required setbacks. And so it popped up through Jake's and my subcommittee for comment through from the planning department, from Jeff Bana. So presumably we'll see something about that in the next meeting in the development services report. Any questions from anyone? All right, we'll move on to the next thing. New business. James Anderson Award and Blue Plaque nominations. Let's start with the James Anderson Award. Casey. I think you were putting in a advertisement to solicit nominations for these 2 awards. Is that correct?
Never decided on a date.
Never decided on a deadline date?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. So as soon as we do that, we can run it in the town crier, and Mike Bites will run it on social media.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, it was usually around the end of February or end of March, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's even been as early as January. It just all
Okay.
depended. We usually don't do it until closer to the summer, so
But at
to
this,
have it be in March wouldn't be.
yeah. I'm just thinking of manpower too. It would be nice to have the deadline for this such that if we get new members, they wouldn't be swamped with this right at the first meeting, but we can involve them in the decision making. So I'm thinking that, am I allowed to make a motion about this? No. Okay, well, let me just think out loud. I'm thinking that maybe the end of March would have enough time for people to submit nominations, as well as put the deadline after our next meeting, but in time for the following meeting.
Yep.
Can I make a motion to have the deadline at the end of March?
Is there a second? Oh, Jake?
Looks like Jacob's gonna second it.
Now you just have to vote on it.
I talked about earlier I talked about the designation and the Blue Plaque nominations, but I never explained the James Anderson Award. James Anderson was a local architect that was heavily involved in heritage projects in the city of Stratford. And he's created well, we've created this award named after him, although he was a significant member of early iterations of what became the Heritage Committee back when it was called LACAC. And so this is an award that we receive nominations for from the public, and we pick a winner based on an individual that can be alive. That's an important point, because the blue plaque nominations exclude people who are still alive, and are only for people who are deceased. The James Anderson Award can still apply for people that are alive but have made an impact in the heritage community in the area. All right, so then we still need to vote on the deadline for that one. Based on the motion for the end of March, I'll vote aye. Unanimous. And then we need to do the exact same thing for the blue plaque committee. It used to be we'd do them every 2 years and have them staggered, but COVID screwed us all up. So we're going to run them both this year. Last year we did 2 blue plaque nominations to try and catch up, but we need to kind of get things back into sync. So the blue plaque nominations would be awarded to a building, but essentially based on the concept that an individual of historical importance resided there at some point. Last year, geez, now I'm going to forget the names. I know Barb's going to know this because she did a wonderful radio thing for it. What was the name of the musician?
It was
Geez, he's super famous. He's just before my time.
Richard Manuel.
Yeah, Richard Manuel with his boyhood house over on what was it, Wells Street?
Wells Street, and James Palmer Rankin, who was a senator and a local doctor, and
local doctor and
a whole lot of things.
Politician over by the hospital
on Church Street.
On Church Street. Prior to
it can also be an event that happened. It doesn't have to be a person.
Okay.
So it's a building that connects a historical event or person.
Yeah. But
in Stratford.
The idea is that the location gets the plaque, but it's not because the location itself is a historical building, but because of something that happened there. So the James Anderson Award is essentially for a person. The blue plaque nomination is also, but that's the person hangs on to it. The blue plaque nomination is essentially also for a person or the event, but it gets mounted to the building where that occurred. And then the actual heritage designation gets applied to a building specifically because that building has heritage components that we would like to preserve. Those are the 3 basic things that we run from the heritage side of things. All right, sorry. So we need a motion for the blue plaque. We have to solicit to the public for nominations. So we need a motion to set a deadline for the blue plaque nomination ad. Barb?
I move we do the same time frame, just do them all together.
Okay. The seconder? Andy? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Casey, in those, I know there's always a little blurb in the advertisement, but we'll have to try to be careful to pick some wording to differentiate between the two, because they're similar enough. The concept is similar enough that people will tend to blur them together.
Yep, we do the exact same one for the James Anderson every single time. I don't recall what we put for the blue plaque one, so let me look and see what we have. Or Barb, I don't know if you have something that we did the last time.
We did the Tell Us Your Story was sort of the theme to it.
Okay.
And I can look and see if I don't have the papers. I'm sure Cambria has them somewhere.
Okay, I'll look too and see, and maybe Mike Bites has it as well from the previous time. So, okay.
Okay. Item 11.2. I was kind of hoping Laura would be here for this one because I'm hoping to tap her for her experience. The Friends of the Shakespearean Gardens. Well, first of all, for everyone to make sure that you know where I'm talking about, the Shakespearean Gardens is the garden that is north of the Perth County Courthouse, excuse me, that's at the west end of Ontario Street, sandwiched between the courthouse and the river. There's that garden that's there with the old chimney that's sticking up there. It looks like a spire. So the Friends of the Shakespearean Gardens, which are a group of volunteers that help maintain it and look out for its best interest, have presented to our committee in the past about the history of those gardens, and have also recently given me another, they've actually made a very glossy pamphlet of it, but this time they just gave me kind of a point form thing. And they are looking for a way to protect it. And they were inquiring about the ability to designate it as a heritage property under the Heritage Act. And I contacted Russell at the city to investigate a couple of the things, because my interpretation is that the Heritage Act is specifically for buildings, not what is essentially landscaping. But what I did also do is confirm the Heritage Conservation District of the downtown core does seem, let me point at the right spot, does seem to run to the river's edge, the south side of the water's edge, and therefore include the Shakespearean Gardens. Also, the Shakespearean Gardens are owned by the city, not by the county that owns the county courthouse. So I'm not quite certain. I'm wondering if this might be a case of them being a little overzealous at protecting the garden when they maybe don't have to. But at this point, I'm thinking that if we get a volunteer to do a little more research and confirm or deny whether the Heritage Act can even be used for that, which I think the answer is no. And any heritage protection that we're even possible to give to them is already achieved through the conservation district. If somebody wants to investigate that. So I think for this one, we just hold it off, because unless there's a volunteer in this group that would like to do that bit of research, because to me, that sounds like something that Laura would love to do.
I nominate Laura.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait until we see her, hopefully at the next meeting. She was supposed to be at tonight's meeting, but didn't pop up. All right, so I'm just telling you guys what that's about. I suspect, as I've mentioned, I suspect the answer is that we can't really do anything for these guys. Also, it gets a little complicated in that anytime we recommend a designation to council, if the application doesn't specifically come from the owner, then it usually gets turned down, as we've recently seen with Avencrest. This one has the weird situation. It would be the city of Stratford asking us to recommend to the city of Stratford to designate it. Like, it's just a weird scenario.
Sounds
So,
like a plaque might make them happy. on the
yeah,
site somewhere.
yeah.
There-
Weirdly, if we were going to do it, my current opinion is if we were going to do it, we would be protecting the chimney, not the gardens.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was a suggestion last year that we could consider them for the James Anderson Award, which doesn't give them a plaque, but does give them recognition. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your recognition, yeah. Okay, so I don't think there's anything for us to do related to that one. This time I was really just kind of bringing it up to you. I'll be looking for a volunteer to investigate it a little bit further. But my initial findings are there really isn't much we can do about it. All right, also under new business, one thing that isn't listed there is we had requests to get a presentation from the Save Avencrest group, several people of which were past members of this committee. And that triggered the clerk canceling their being on our agenda. And did everybody get the email from Tatiana? I think it was earlier today. We haven't seen this before, but I guess the procedure now is that if we're going to be requested to have a presentation by some group, they need to essentially apply to the clerk for permission to present to us. So it's kind of a point of order type thing at this point, I think. Again, we haven't seen it before, but it's there now. Okay, so if anyone gets contacted by anyone that wants to do a presentation from us, it's not as simple as asking Casey to add them to our agenda as it has been in the past. They now have to get permission through the clerk to get added to our agenda, or the clerk will drop them from our agenda. Anything else to be discussed under new business for any of you guys? Anyone? Casey?
Brian, did you want to talk about the three subcommittees this meeting, or did you
Oh,
want
yes.
to wait until we possibly had the two new members at our next meeting?
Well, I would wait for most of those, but the review committee that is down to just Jake and I right now.
Right,
You never know how many are going to come through from one month to the next, but essentially they come through from Russell, who works in the building department, or Russell Harley. He sends them to us by email. We review their stuff. He's pretty good at providing us with any of the background, like if they're for a designated building, he'll send us the paperwork for the original designation, which will highlight whether it's the doors and windows that were important for the designation, or the front facade, or so one we saw recently was talking about the interior trim work, that kind of the doors and the interior doors and the interior trim work, rather than, well, in addition to some of the exterior stuff. So it'd be nice if we had a couple more volunteers that wanted to be on that committee. It's limited to essentially reviewing paperwork by email. I think probably the worst month, it was maybe 2 or 3 projects. Jake, do you think, has there ever been more than 3 in a month? It doesn't feel like it.
No.
Yeah, so it's not overly time consuming. However, once it sends through from Russell, I think we've got, 5 business days or a week, like a calendar week to, is it 5 days? To respond to him so that he can respond to the applicant. So there is not really a rush, but there is a timeline involved when we get it. Anyway, I saw Jeff putting his hand up as a volunteer. That's awesome. Let's get him
I'll
on there.
volunteer. Perfect.
Anyone else? Jacob, I'm gonna just assume that you're still interested in being on that committee. Yeah, okay. Anyone else want to be on it? At least 4 would be nice. We don't have to have 4 today, though. I mean, we could potentially get
Yeah, because you don't have Laura either right now, too. So
True.
no, you did have 5 in the past, 5 people.
yeah.
I wouldn't be able to commit today, maybe in our March meeting, because I have some things up in the air right now, but if you ask the same question in March, I'll be able to.
We'll ask the same question in March anyway, because hopefully we have 2 new members there to
Great.
include them on. There's some other committees that deal, for instance, with the James Anderson Award administration and the Blue Plaque Committee administration and stuff. But we'll, for now, because we've made the motions to advertise for them and they're not going to be deadline until end of March, we'll just postpone them to deal with the next meeting. Barb, do you have a question?
I had, yeah, one thing on this point, if you need somebody to just help you guys out for a while, I would rather be on the committees I was on last time. So, but I could do it for a while until you get new members. And if you get,
It's probably okay
Hit
with
and
just
need
the
a lot of
3 of
help.
us for now. We never know how many are going to come through in a month. I mean, we might, some years have been really slow. I think the first year I was on it, we did maybe 3 the entire year. Lately, we've been doing a couple a month. There's just based on where people are doing renovations. Essentially, since the beginning of COVID, there's been a lot of downtown renovations because people were slow in business or whatever. There's been a lot of downtown work being done. So it might be that nothing even comes through for that.
What's the name of that subcommittee, Brian?
I forget. I call it the review committee. So
I think technically on my sheet, it says the permit review and heritage sign subcommittee.
yeah.
the other thing is there was a new committee created last year and it was run by Howard and he is gone. So we need to figure that out or add it to our list of subcommittees.
Okay.
That was I don't remember what it was called either. We were supposed to be suggesting proactive designations instead of waiting till we hear it's going to be demolished and then trying to catch up.
Right. The proactive Herald Committee.
Yeah.
Howard Committee.
Howard.
The
It was
proactive Howard Committee.
Laura and I were on it, I think with Cambria and him and
Yeah.
Howard ran it. So I don't know
Yeah, we have the designation subcommittee and the awards subcommittee. So I don't know if that was
That's
part of the designation.
designation. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds
and
right.
Howard and Cambria were both on that.
Because we're still, unless there's a rush for that right for this month, because we're still a little shorthanded. I think we postpone dealing with that for another month. Hopefully we got 2 or maybe even 2 new members, maybe plus Laura for the next meeting, which just gives us a bigger pool of faces to pull from. All right, anything else? Nope. All right. Next meeting, Tuesday, March the 14th at 7 p.m. This one is in person
It is.
at the Rotary Complex.
Mhm.
Rather than we used to meet at the Erie Street building, so it is not there. We haven't been there in 2 years anyway. Then for a couple of times it was at City Hall in the auditorium. It is not there. It is at the Rotary Complex. Okay.
And it will be for the whole year.
Everybody, make sure you go to the right building. And it's the Mansbridge room, which I think is on the 2nd floor when you go in.
No, it's on the 1st floor. So in between the arena and the hall section, there's a hallway that joins them, and the Mansbridge room is right in there. You'll most likely have to go in through the arena doors. And so when you go in there, go kind of go under the stairs, and you'll see double doors to go in
Right.
there, and it's right in there.
So everybody show up a few minutes early to give you time to play hide and seek, looking for where this building is.
I'll look for
Not
you.
this building, this room is. All right, 7 p.m. And that's on the normal Tuesday, which is the March the 14th, which for people who have kids in public school, that might be during the March break. I'm not too certain. Is it? Does anyone know if that's during the March break?
I think it is March break.
Yeah, okay. So if it affects you, you know about it now. All right, adjournment. I guess we need a motion.
To adjourn.
Jacob, I just saw his hand first. A seconder, we'll put Larry on there for that. All in favor? Cool, let's get out of here.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Nice day.